Hello and good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us. It's a very warm welcome to our webinar series entitled Impact at Work. We acknowledge how precious your time is, so thank you very much for spending it with us. My name is Jonathan Thompson, and I work at Impactful Specialist Solutions, an IT partner that assists clients in building those very sought-after technology skills and capabilities. As you'll see from the slide, today's topic is powering up your presentations. It is a repeat of last webinar, but due to our attendance limit being capped at 1,000 people, some people missed out. And so you might say today's webinar is back due to popular demand, and once again starring the extremely talented Tracy van der Merwe. I think in a world where every single presentation counts, these advanced techniques will really set you apart, whether you're addressing colleagues, pitching to clients, or otherwise speaking at any events. Just a few house rules, please. Please, can you make sure your microphone is on mute? We really would love the session to be interactive, so please post any comments or questions in the chat. We do have someone monitoring the chat, and if we don't answer your questions, there will hopefully be some time for a Q&A at the end of the session. Alternatively, we'll be able to email you next week. We will also be sharing a recording and Tracy's details with you early next week. And finally, we really value your feedback. You'll see at the end of the session, there will be a QR code. So we'd really appreciate it if you would be able to take the time just to fill that in. For all of you who don't know Tracy, she's a highly experienced facilitator who over the past 25 years has developed a unique talent for bringing presentations to life with her mastery of PowerPoint design and applied skills. She's an expert in both visual communication and modern design principles. Her clients absolutely love her as she is able to combine both the art of storytelling and visually design to create powerful and engaging presentations. So I think that's enough from me. So please sit back and enjoy the next hour with us, as Tracy will give you a few tips and tricks to bring your PowerPoint presentations to life. Over to you, Trace.
Thanks, Jonathan. Sure. I'm so excited to be here again and doing this presentation again. This PowerPoint is just an exciting tool to be able to use. So I'm hoping you're going to get a lot out of it as well. A 7-minute speech just transported me into his world with just a single rose. You and I are not very different from this flower, he said. Just like this flower is unique, you are unique. All of us have something special that makes us beautiful. Do you know what makes you special? Now, the answer that can be a little difficult to find because sometimes life is cruel and has a cruel way of just plucking your petals, breaking you in two and throwing you into the trash. Now, when you're broken, it's very difficult to feel special. Okay, it does get better from there, but I just wanted to explain to you how this speech, I will never forget it, and I watched it a few years ago, and all it was he had a rose that he presented with. Now, why I bring this into this presentation, because I want to talk about how with presentations, and this is a stat that came out where your audience will forget 90% of what you present, and that's a lot that they forget. And so if it's not presented in a way that is engaging, and I think it's worse today because people have just got so much out there that they're busy with, that it's colorful, and people are also with a lot of things. I mean, if on YouTube it's all about the little clips, you're not really engaging with a full-on presentation. So I just want to look at how do we then get our audience more engaged? And I want to look at the stat of 90% of why is this like this? So the first thing is the content overload. People get amnesia from just too much information. The brain can't handle so much information, so it goes and it locks down and it doesn't remember everything because of too much information. And when you've been in a presentation where you've just had lots and overload, you actually forget what the presenter has said. A lot of contents are the same. So if we sit in a presentation, a lot of the time, people use the similar techniques. So what happens is it looks the same. Now, if we bring these together, the big problem is you end up with, I think I've forgotten this before. So what we want to make sure is they don't forget it, okay, and that we do stand out. Now, I want to give you the reason for this is it's a word called habituation. Now, what habituation means is that when something happens, you get that first stimuli and it's exciting right in the beginning. But after a while, it wears off and the brain has to do this. Could you imagine if we were stimulated all the time? We would be absolutely exhausted. So think about just in the workplace where you've got music going, and at the beginning you're humming along and you're enjoying the music, and after a while it just becomes this white noise behind you. And this is exactly what the habituation is about. Now we think back as well to even our phones and to things in our life that we just get used to. We get a new phone, it's exciting in the beginning, but after a while, when you've been using it for a while, it just becomes the mundane, the thing we use, etc. And so what we need to do is we need to make sure that we don't allow people to go into the state of habituation, and we can stimulate. Now, Carmen Simon, she works with the brain and how people and how the brain works within especially presentation work. And what they did was they took some chimpanzees and they had a door. Now, the chimpanzees knew that behind the door was these bananas. Now, what happens is they had this dopamine rush because now they knew there was the bananas on the other side. It was called the reward. The big problem was that when they kept doing this, they eventually became so used to it that they forgot about it. So what they did was they put a light on the door, and every time the light went on, they would then open the door. So this created now this anticipation, because all of a sudden the chimpanzees waited for that light to come on. But that eventually also just became something mundane because, okay, the light, bananas, it all plays a role. And so what they started doing was they then started, when the chimpanzees would come in, sometimes there weren't bananas. And what this does is it actually creates uncertainty. So the big thing is we get the reward, we get the dopamine, but when it's too often, that dopamine doesn't get released as much anymore. So what they said was that when you kill the dopamine, you kill the goal orientating behavior, because now we're not, you don't have the stimulus anymore. So what I want you to think about is think about your own presentations or presentations you've actually watched, and think about where has it become predictable. When you stand in front of a team, do they know exactly what the next slide is going to be? How do we create something just slightly different? So I want to just give you a tip, and it's give the brain something it can expect with an element of surprise. So now the tip is please don't make everything so different that they all of a sudden get a shock. So what we want is we want certain elements that the brain can say, oh yeah, okay, I see that, I recognize that, but then there's something that there's the surprise. So we can all see the surprise here. Okay, we all know Einstein, but that body here, I wish it was that easy just to put a body on like that. But it's really about just having something that the brain can recognize. All right, so engaging content really needs to create attention. There needs to be, sorry, it needs to get the people's attention. With that, you create a memory. So now all of a sudden people stand up. Now, just like that rose, that was a memory to me, and I won't forget his speech just because I think back to that rose. So what's creating the memory so that the people will remember your presentation? And then this now drives the decision. So what we need to do within our presentation is avoid the habituation with just something that changes within your slides. And that's what I'm going to be talking about today. How do we create that stimulus? The second thing is build anticipation. And again, we don't want anticipation on every slide because then also that's going to get boring, and also then they switch off. So we need to really plan our slides and say, okay, this is where we need that little bit of anticipation. And then it's include a little bit of uncertainty as well. Because you know what? People make decisions on what they remember and not what they forget. And I think that's really important. So if this is all true, and I've said about the 90%, what we want to do is we want to make sure that we control the 10% that they do remember. And this is what this training is, I'm wanting to show you, is how do you control that 10%? How do you put in things that the people go away and say, sure, I remember that. Okay, that one thing. So now I call it the golden thread. What is that 10% golden thread that you'll take throughout your presentation so people will remember something? Now you will see as I work through my presentation that I bring in certain things again and again and again that I want you to remember. So we're going to talk about this golden thread that needs to go through the presentation. Now, in order for that to happen, first of all, you need to make sure you plan first. You know, so often we start a presentation, we get going, and we start doing our slides, but we haven't planned yet exactly what are we wanting to put across. And it's important to make sure that you plan first. Okay, because that will make sure that you're confident, okay, you're influential, you're impressive, and it's just through how do I plan the presentation, right? And it's about understanding the audience, and that's really, really important, because if you don't understand the audience, you don't create the presentation for the audience, then they're going to get lost or they're going to get bored, etc. So you've got to make sure you understand, who am I presenting to? Is the information relevant to who I'm actually going to be presenting to? And then that 10% message. What is the 10% message I want to take through my presentation? So that is all needs to be planned up front before I even start the actual slides. So let's just look at the key concepts and design principles that I'm just going to work through just before going into some tips. The first thing is, remember, it's about your engagement with the audience. How are they responding to you? So if we make things too difficult and just every slide is incredibly busy, you're going to lose your audience. So we need to make sure that our slides are simple enough for the people to grasp and read it, and then, but it's not simplistic. Okay, so they're still sophisticated, and you'll see the different ways we do it, but just making sure it's simple enough for them to actually grasp what you're wanting to take through your 10%. And then have a consistent theme. People like that consistent theme going through on a PowerPoint as well, in that when, you know, the whole thing with Einstein, you don't want everything to be totally different, but you want something to be consistent. And so we use our themes to be quite consistent. And then the logic and flow, that's in your planning, making sure that there is that logic and the flow of your presentation, that people will grasp what you're wanting to present. And then keep the wording short. We've heard this before, and to the point. Don't overdo your slides with lots of words that the person is, all they're doing is eventually looking at your slide and confused. All right. And then use a combination of images, graphics, etc. And I'm going to be looking at a lot of that today, but it's just making sure that you put a little bit of everything in it so that at least they don't get bored. And then be smart with your animations and transitions. I remember starting, and I've trained PowerPoint for many years, but if you remember the word arts came out and everybody was so excited. And all of a sudden, every presentation that the people presented to me had that lovely wavy blue line, word art. Do you remember that word art? If you go back to working with presentations quite a while ago and when word art first came out. So be careful with your animations, your transitions, etc., to make it effective. And then make clever use of the white space. And we're going to look at that as well. The last one is, how do we add interactivity within a slide? That's a big drive now towards presentations, is the interactivity. And I'm going to show you a bit of that as well today. So what is my thread that I would like to take, the 10% that I'd like to take through my presentation is the slide. I would like you to see that what it is, it's about changing stimulus. It's about how do I change every now and again to something slightly different that creates either that anticipation or all of a sudden, oh, wow, that's interesting. So this slide is so important. And what we're going to do is we're going to follow, how do we take it through, maybe changing it up between text and graphics, etc. And I'm going to go through each one with you and explain to you how we're going to take these through by changing stimulus within a presentation. First one I'm going to work with is text and graphics. So often, this is what our presentation looks like. We just got a lot of words on there, and there's nothing that grabs the audience that says, okay, how do I bring you into the slide? Now, this is a slide about a specific person. Her name is Jane Vella, and she deals with adult education. And how do you present to adults? Now, the problem is I just talk about Jane and nothing really stands out this, and you're not drawn into my slide. When I am talking about somebody, I love to put a picture of that person in my slide. So now you're drawn to this little old lady that is in the slide, who is Jane, and she is the one that now said these words. Now it makes it a bit more real, and we've got something that just creates a little bit of interest. Also, you'll notice I've now changed my text a little bit, and when I want that eye to move. So there's certain things in my text that I want you to actually read, and you can see I've now changed it into a different color. You can bold it, etc., just to give the eye a break from just all text the same. The problem with all text the same, they get focused on the actual slide and they don't focus on you presenting, because now they're trying to read it. So we need to make it easy for the eye to go through the slide. So I just use simple things like formatting, bold, color, etc. But pictures also play a big role in just bringing people into what you're saying. Now, another simple thing with a picture, and we know that PowerPoint also can work with backgrounds. Now, I've got a picture there, but I want to show you when I've removed a background, how all of a sudden the lady becomes more relatable, or you get drawn more into the slide with just a background that is removed. Because now all of a sudden you can see her, okay? And she then ties into the slide just by removing a background. Again, you can see I've used a bit of color, I've used some bold, etc. So this is just within text. And bringing in graphic that I can actually create a bit of excitement within my slides. Now, the last thing I want to show you within this is that sometimes what we do is we get so used to putting graphics in that now every slide's got a graphic. Sometimes let them use their imagination. So my next slide, what I've done is I've used a specific color, because you can see it says taking audiences on a truly engaging learning adventure. Now, the adventure part for me is see that type of feel. So what I've done is I've just put in a color that draws the audience to now create their own picture in their mind. So just something different rather than just putting text. And then also, graphics, what happens is people get lazy. All right, so that is something to just look at as well in just making sure that you create that stimulus. Another thing is sometimes you have a slide like this. Now, this is a slide where I'm saying to you, what you do now is you focus on the slide, and because you've got to try and read it. What am I trying to say? And all of a sudden, the audience gets lost in the slide because there's just too many words. So a nice tool that you'll see gets used often is something like symbols. Now notice this is exactly the same information I've just had on that big slide, but what I've done is I've brought it into symbols. So now all of a sudden it's easier to read, same information, but it's easier to read because there's some pictures there. And I've now got my points on the symbols. And you can see making it so much more easy to read. So symbols really play a nice role in just breaking up information. Also now your eye is not just on text and confused. Sometimes I also want to take people through a process. Now notice I've just got three things that I want to take them through a process here. And the eye goes from one to the other. But something that we have discovered, and what you'll see a lot of people have discovered, is looking now at, and now look how this slide looks different, is instead of using straight lines as arrows, is using curved lines. It makes it so much easier on the eye to move to the next process. So that's just a tip I want to give you, in that if you want to create the movement from 1, 2 to 3, is sometimes use a curve line, and it just creates a little bit more interest and flow. So the person moves from one thing to another. Okay. Sometimes you're just out of ideas and you just really don't know what to do with this slide. And Microsoft have put in such an amazing AI feature, which is your design tool. Now, your design tool is, you can see the on design on the menu, and you can just click on design. And what it'll do is it'll actually go and look at what are some maybe options that they can give you. And I don't have to think too hard. Okay. Just to add something slightly different to your slides. And you can see I've chosen this one because I thought this one would work well rather than just text, but I just really was lost for trying to design another slide. So Designer really just helps you create a slide and just makes it look a lot more interesting. Okay, so that's text and graphics of how you can use them together to create the stimulus. The next thing I'd like to do is just look at formal versus informal. Now, a lot of our slides are formal, but every now and again, it's nice to just go in and put in something that just grabs attention. My Einstein was an informal slide where it's just a little bit funny. People, you all of a sudden thought, oh, okay, that's interesting. You had that little giggle with what I'd put on. And sometimes just that informal slide can just create something that just changes the feel of all these formal slides. I've just put a few examples there of some of the stuff that you maybe can use. Okay, just to make it a little bit more informal. One of the big moves that Microsoft did was also looking at the static to dynamic. Okay, so static to dynamic just means that sometimes your slides, you're going in and maybe you've used a little bit of animation, but nothing major, and all the slides just come in with all the text exactly the same. So I want to show you ways where you can have some slides with text and some slides where it creates a little bit of movement and also interaction with your slides. Okay, now you can see I brought in my golden thread again, so that you pay attention to my golden thread. Creating interactive slides. The first one I'm going to do is about hyperlinks. How do I use hyperlinks? One of the changes in the way we present these days is just going from slide to slide to slide and just talking to people. Sometimes I get an audience and I think, you know what, I actually want to go to that particular point or group of slides rather than this one. So what we do is we create an interaction. And what I like to do is create hyperlinks with symbols. So you can see in here, if I go and I click on my introduction, okay, automatically it's going to take me to my introduction slide. And then you can see I've got a hyperlink back again. All right. And there you can see that goes back into these slides. So I can move around the slides and look at, maybe I want to now go into topics before I even go into goals. So that is why hyperlinks are nice, where you can create something within your, and make it a content page rather than doing it just with wording. Now, what I normally do is create boxes with colors, this just because of the background, etc. So I just create, and then I create a symbol on it. All right. And put the symbols in. And then what I do is I create an icon. I've put an icon in each one that depicts what I'm going to. Okay. So that's what you saw just now. Then all I do is I go onto that box and I either click on the icon or the box, and I right click and I create a link. So you can see there, I just right click on link, and it will take me into where all my slides. Now I can choose which slide do I want to link to that box. All right, so maybe the first, either a slide or maybe the first of that grouping of slides, etc. I can create the hyperlink to it. So just right click, say link, this screen comes up and I put which slide will now link to that box or to that particular symbol. Really nice way of just making your slides a little bit more interactive instead of just going from one slide to another. Okay. There you can see I can just go into goal and work across. Now, what you'll notice at the top, what I like to do as well, is put the symbols of those as well on top. So instead of me having to go back to that particular slide every time, I can also just click on these symbols and go backwards and forwards to the slides as well. So that's just another trick that you can do. So hyperlinking really is a nice tool to create that little bit of interaction. All right, another way we're going to do is Zoom. I don't know if you've used your Zoom feature. Really nice. It creates also a hyperlink, but it's a bit quicker and easier to do. So if you look at, and I just want to show you what it does before I actually show you how it works. And remember, this is all within the courses that we do present. So please, this is just really an information session, but a lot of this can be taught within our courses that we offer that we will be speaking about right at the end. But now what we've got is we've got our content pages, and you can see what Zoom has done is it's brought the actual pages that I've linked here, and it's put it in there. So it just creates quite a nice content look, so that I can also again click on anyone I want, or as I go through the process, you can see I'm going to be talking about the first one. Now it goes through the slides that are connected. So you can see now I'm talking about the agenda. What it does now is it goes back, and I'm going to show you how to do this. It goes back to the content page where now and I love to go back to content pages because, okay, I've spoken about this. Now we move on to the next thing. So Zoom creates this movement of slide, which is just really creates really a nice look rather than just the slides, as I say, static. All right, again, we've spoken about it. It goes back to this one, and I'm just going to go to the end. So you can see it just keeps doing that, keeps going back. Zoom, that's what Zoom is doing. So it's keeping going back, and it's hyperlinked to those particular slides. It's just creating some nice movement. Okay, so how do I do this? What I like to do is I first like to start with sections. I do create sections so each one of those blocks, I create sections to group the slides in. Okay, now the reason I'm doing it here is because there's two different ways you can use. You can use a content slide, or you can group different sections that you want to group. So what we do, I always just create sections first. Now I also create sections just because I get a nice flow of my slides. So what I do is I go into view now, and I can view all my slides with their sections. And now I can say, oh, that slide actually should be rather in the next section, and I can drag it up. So I always just go into slide sorter, create sections, and then I create my Zoom. So Zoom you can find is in insert. So on your menu, it's in your insert menu, and you can see there's Zoom. Now with Zoom, you can do three things. Either you can see it's a summary Zoom. Now with summary Zoom, what it does is it takes the first slide of each section. So sometimes I don't want to do that. I only want to do it in specific sections. I don't want all my sections involved like that particular one I showed you now. So then I create section Zoom. All right, so summary Zoom will be nice for a content page. Then you can also do a slide Zoom. Now, slide Zoom does the same as what we've just done now in within doing a hyperlink. I can't show you each one individually, and we just don't have time for that, but maybe go either have a look at it, or as I said, these are things that we do in our courses. But we're using the Zoom feature, it creates this interaction again and movement, which just makes your slides look really more impressive as well. All right, so you can see now when I click on the section Zoom, this screen comes up. It's already selected those that have got a section. Okay. And then what we do is we then just say, okay, we're happy with that, and then we insert. If you're not happy, you can actually deselect the sections maybe you don't want to use. Okay. All right, so that is now looking at Zoom, and I know I'm going through quickly, but I want to introduce you to the features. That's what I want to do. Now, when we've got the zoom, now you know that any insert tool, if you put in a picture or anything that you insert, if you click on it, you'll see there's another menu that comes up. So right at the top, you now get a menu, which is the zoom menu. Okay, I click on the zoom menu and I just want to go through just one or two things that you can do in Zoom, which you can see over there. You can even change the picture. Right on the left hand side, you can see you can actually change the picture. So you don't have to have the pictures that are from your slide. You can change it. The other one that is quite important is the return to Zoom. So if you've got your 4 slides, you've got to make sure that it's returning back to that summary slide. Then all you do is you say return to Zoom, and it will return it to that summary slide. Now, there's a lot of other things you can do with normally your drawing tools and graphic tools. You can see you can put headings, you can put borders around, etc. So there's a lot you can still do, and it's just by clicking on one of the options, and you can see the menu changes, just like your insert tools. So Zoom just gives a really, really nice feel. Okay. The next one I want to look at is Morph. Now, Morph is a slightly different thing than Zoom. It's not creating hyperlinks. It's really creating that movement, and you can do a lot with morphing. I just want to show you a simple example that we do within a training course. So you can see I'm going to be talking about managing your inner world, and I'm talking about the behaviors, thoughts, and feelings. Now, what I want to do is I want to make sure that when I'm talking about behavior, that is the part that comes up and that is highlighted for you. So what I do is now I'm going to be talking about behaviors. This text arrives, becomes a bit bigger. Now all of a sudden there's a little bit of interest, and you know that I'm talking about behavior. When I'm finished that, I click and it brings up the thoughts. All right? And you can see it's a lovely movement of it, and you can use this in many different ways. And now I want to talk about feelings. All right, so you can see how it moves, and it just now is highlighting the boxes I want to talk about. And then I always go into that summary so that I can just explain it. Now, basically, the big thing with morphing is you've got to create a slide per movement before for each morph. So I create my first slide, which is the 3 different boxes. My second slide, what I do is I make that box bigger, and I create and I put the text in it. Now, if you just do these as static slides, all that's going to do is get the movement like I'm getting now. So you can see it just goes to the next slide. It doesn't really create anything exciting. But when you do a morph, you can see it gave you that beautiful movement that just created a lovely impression of your slides as well. So I've just created the 3 different slides and then gone back into my actual slides. So that's the only thing with morphing is you don't want to use morphing too much in your slides, because you're going to have a lot of slides. It's going to be made up of a lot of slides. So you just got to be careful how often you morph as well, because else you're going to have a very big slide deck. And again, exactly what we said in the beginning, we want to change the stimulus. So we don't want to have all your slides morphed and then the person gets bored. It's good to have a little bit of Zoom, a little bit of morphing, okay, a bit of text, pictures, etc., just to create the interest, and so that they actually don't know what's next. But I have got the theme that goes through. Now, all I do is I've created my slides. I select on the left-hand side on the slides, I select all the slides that I want in the morph. So I just select the slides by either clicking the first one, holding the shift key down, clicking the last one, or using my control key and clicking on each one. And then I go to transitions. Morphing is part of it, transitions. It's how each slide transitions to give you that effect. So you select the slide you want to use, and you go into transitions morph. Really, really nice tool. Okay. The next thing we're going to do is monologue to dialogue. This is a really big move, because people, you know, we're dealing with so many Teams meetings. We're dealing with just meetings where people get bored and start yawning within your audience. I want to just show you some ways where we create that interaction and we draw people into the presentation. And that is taking it from me just talking to now drawing in the conversation, drawing in what are some questions we can ask, etc. I'm going to show you some different options. The first one, we've got forms. Now, forms is a very basic option within the PowerPoint, and you can do basic questions, but it comes with PowerPoint or with Microsoft. So it is a basic one where you can just maybe ask a simple question. So I click on forms in my insert menu, and then I put maybe a basic question. So my basic question is, have you ever felt you have been held hostage in a conversation? Yes or no? Now, what we do is the minute I submit it and I want to start getting answers, there's a QR code that comes up. I just say to the audience, if it's online or in person, I say, please take your phones right now, and I want you to scan on the QR code. Now, this works really, really well with team. I'm going to show you now one or two that I've used for team talks. But it really is nice and it could be in your manual as well. So if you've got a manual that you're giving the people, you could put the QR code in there. And then you can see as they're answering the question, you can see it comes up live on your board, on the screen, and it just creates quite an interest. Now, there's a package I use. Now, please, it's got a lot of features that a lot of the other interactive ones within PowerPoint. I'm going to talk about one now, but this is ClassPoint, which I just use. I just find it easier. But the problem is it is a plan where you can only use free up to 25 people coming online with you. And it is a bit limited within that one, and then you've got to pay. So I'm just going to show you what I do with it, and then I will talk to the one or two other ones that you can get on PowerPoint that you can use for the same effect. So on this one, I've created just at the bottom a little multiple choice. I've asked the same question, but you can see now it's more interactive in my slide. And I say how many questions are there, etc. So I build it up on the left. And then what I do is, again, I have the QR code that comes up. I ask people to go onto the QR code, and you'll see it builds it up onto the screen. And then you can see that it comes into in here into a live as well, which is really, really nice. Now on your screen, you can see on the right hand, the one that's just come in now is what it would appear on their actual phone. So you can see the slide appears and which one do they want to choose. So it's a really cool tool. All right. And then another one that I like to use quite a bit is I like to use the option with a word cloud, where you've asked a question and everybody comes in and gives you a word, and you can see it puts it up, and it's really, really nice. Yes, Mentimeter does exactly the same. I'm going to also show you something else Mentimeter does that this one does as well. Now, something I did last week that just worked so incredibly well is I asked about the story of the shoes. And what we did was, it was about collaboration, and I was talking about how everybody has their own story, and sometimes we need to get into somebody else's shoes in order to be able to collaborate and to understand their stories. So what I did was, because we were on Teams, it was a really big group, I've got them to take a photo of their shoes where they were, and they had to caption their shoes. Now, this group was amazing. Some of the stuff they came out with the shoes, really, it was so much fun. Now, I did look up, Mentimeter also has this option where you can put up a photo. So it's a really nice tool just to create a little bit of fun within it. And as I say, these guys just were amazing with their captions, how they actually captioned it for us. Yeah, I was quite surprised. So that was just a nice, just extra little tool to use. Sometimes we don't have the option, though. Maybe we can't. Maybe it's grayed out. The company doesn't allow us to use these tools. There are options within your animation that you can use that basically is on action. So I've got 5 points here, and maybe I say to the people, listen, okay, it's about public speaking. Which one do you want me to open? Make a competition of it, etc. And all I need to do is I can actually click on, say people say number 3, I can click on it and it opens it up for me. So I have got tools that I can just use through animation by clicking, and that's a really nice option as well. And all I do is I put a block over the text that I want and say the animation, I say exit, but on a click. Okay, so the action, go and look at the action tools within animation. It really also builds a really nice interactive option. You can put a question there and people give you an answer of A or B, and you can take it away and which one is right. So those are also options that you can build rather than having to use these tools. All right, facts and stories. We know that in the beginning, when I started, I just used a story to try and bring in what I was about to talk about. Now, why we'd want to do so, most of our slides are built on fact. But what a story does, a story helps you build an emotional connection. So just by adding a referral story, a reference story, just a basic story that you want to bring into a presentation to just go in and highlight something that you're trying to say, just makes a big difference, and it draws people in. Okay, and make sure that people are communicating and the emotional side is drawn in, because people remember a lot more. So remember we spoke about they forget the 90%. So when we tell a story, people actually remember that a lot more than if we're just going with facts all the time. So bringing in a story is lovely. All right, now the last one is about complexity to simplicity. Now you can see, so we've used the text, the graphics, we've done formal to informal, we've done static to dynamics, we've now changed it, just not always been monologue, we've brought in some dialogue, there's facts, there's stories, etc. So there's so much we can do to change the stimulus of your of the slides. The last one I want to talk about is complexity to simplicity. Is about how do we sometimes, when we've got to put a slide in there that is incredibly busy and got a lot of numbers on it, etc., that we can actually use it and get the brain ready for that slide that's important for you to see. Now what we do is we talk about priming the brain so it's ready to pay attention. Now, I just want to talk in this last section about priming. Now, there's a lot of different ways we can prime, but I just want to talk one in particular that is really important. And I want to show you how we prime. And it's just getting the brain ready for a slide that you really want people to pay attention to. Now, the first step is we're going to look at all our slides and we're going to decide which slide do we want to, which slide is important for people to really be reading or we're going to be taking through. Maybe it's a busy slide, etc. So we are going to identify it. Then we're going to include a prime. Now, I want to explain to you all that a prime is something totally different to the slide that you're wanting people to pay attention to. You can see in this case, I want people to pay attention to the 80 and 82 slide, because that is really its numbers, etc. But it's quite busy, but I want people to really pay attention to that slide. So what I do is I put a slide before it that is really, really totally different. That is something that just catches people's attention in order to move it to the next slide. Instead of just having a lot of numbers, etc., have a slide that can just break it, and we call it priming. It just prepares the brain for that next slide. So what we do is we have market expansion, and then what I do is now I bring the busy slide, and they're not exactly the same. Okay? And what this does, and as I said, there's just so many options out there of how we can do that. But I just want to explain that when I make something totally different, it just creates that interest, and especially with when we are dealing with biggish slides like this with a lot of numbers where people just shut down. The other thing is when I'm using these tools of using graphs, etc., please just remember as well, you can use animation in your graphs. Don't bring up the whole graph at once. You can create animations where the animations now will bring up different parts of it as you speak. Okay. So the big question for me is, how will you control the 10% that they will remember? What is your thread? So whenever you are presenting, whenever you're going through the presentation, how will you make sure that they remember that 10%? Now, what I'd like to do is, we have got a bit of time because we finished a bit earlier, because I think we started so nicely on time. If there was anybody that wants to come in with their mic, and I know you've been asking, Tim, I've been seeing a lot of things coming through on the chat, but I'd love maybe if you'd like to just ask a question live, and coming through on your, with, you can switch your mic on if you've got any very specific question with some of the stuff. Now, I did go quite quickly through the presentation, and I did explain it. So I just want to make sure that you understand that this is really just an info session. And I just want to give you some really exciting tools that you can work with. Are we going to go to Jonathan now? I don't know if, Jonathan, you want to, and then we can have, and then I will open to answering any questions afterwards. No problem.
Yeah, Tracy, thanks very much. I think it's been an amazing session again, having had 230 people join us for the full hour. So I think it talks to your engaging presentation. So thank you. Thanks a lot. Before we move on, there is a QR code on the screen. We would really appreciate if you wouldn't mind taking the time just to complete the feedback for us, because these Impact at Work series of webinars are really meant to design to help you become more effective in your place of work. So any feedback that you can give us around the PowerPoint or otherwise what you might be interested in hearing about would be most valuable. We do have a little bit of time. Are there any questions?
No, there have been quite a lot of questions behind with Tim there.
Okay.
Been great.
So I think then we all know that time is valuable. As we said in the beginning, there will be a follow-up email next week where we will share the recording with of Tracy today. So keep an eye out for that. Also, there'll be some information around the effective design and PowerPoint courses that Tracy does do. Our next webinar, which will be before the end of the year, will be on the new features in Microsoft Teams, which enable you to communicate more effectively. So if there's nothing else, I think I'd like to wrap up a little bit early and give you some time back. And really, once again, thank you for the time. I do hope that you've gained some practical, immediately applicable skills that can elevate your next presentation to not just another slide deck, but an unforgettable experience for you and your audience. And I think, for me, one of the standout things, Tracy, is we need to remember the golden thread, because people make decisions not on what they forget, which is the 90%, but on what they remember, which is the 10%. So that would be my message to all of you, is remember the golden thread.
Thank you. I am on for a little bit longer if anybody just wants to ask one or two questions.
I see we do have a question from Adrian.
Yeah.
Adrian, please go ahead.
Just want to ask, do you advise the camera to be on during an online session that you present, or off?
I prefer, I think it is a personal thing, but I do prefer it on. And it depends. Are you talking for the presenter or the attendees?
The presenter.
The presenter. I do prefer it on, because it just creates a little bit more of a rapport, where if you are just, again, you're only seeing an initial, it is so difficult, you know, even for the trainer, when you're seeing just initials, it's quite difficult. So I definitely would prefer it being, the camera being on when you're presenting.
I think it's tough for the presenter, but I do think it creates the session to be a bit more engaging. We have got a question from Mfuni. Please go ahead. Mfuni, are you there? I see we do have a question. Mfuni, are you going ahead?
Hi, can you hear us now?
Yes, we can.
Thank you. It seems like we have a bit of problem with our connection. So you asked us that we must make clever use of white spaces, but didn't understand what you meant by that.
Okay, so you don't have, with on a presentation, is try and not just overfill it with words and pictures, etc. So what we do is we put a bit of white space on it, just to create interest. and cleanliness, because when you've just got too much on a page, the person doesn't know where to look, etc. So within your slide deck, we just want to make sure that you don't have just busy slides all the time. There are slides where what we call just using the white space just keeps it neat, and also just sometimes creates interest, where maybe you just have a picture on it with just a picture with just white space around it. So it's just to create,
understood.
yeah, so just to create a slightly different slide.
Okay, Kenneth, you next, you're up. Kenneth, can you hear me?
I just wanted to ask if you can share the slides afterward. We would really appreciate it.
Okay, I think we are going to be sharing a recording of the session rather than the individual slides. As I think you might have seen in the chat, we do offer in detailed PowerPoint design courses, should you be interested, but you'll be getting a recording of the session. I don't believe the individual slides. Tracy, is that right?
It depends. Yeah,
Okay.
I don't mind.
Okay. So then if you're happy to share the presentation, we can do that as well. I feel a bit like an auctioneer, going once, going twice. If there are no further, sorry?
All your where do you get a list of all your courses? Is it on that website of yours?
Yes, that's correct. But
Okay.
we can also email it to you. And in the
Please,
follow-up
thank
email, okay, we can
you.
definitely do that.
Thanks.
So I think without further ado, Tracy, once again, I think what you managed to really combine well is the art of design and storytelling. And I think it really does create a powerful message, because it allows us to really influence, or whatever we're trying to convey in terms of our message, to really get it across. So thanks all for attending. Wishing you a wonderful weekend, and look out for the emails next week. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Thanks, both of you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.